Good afternoon, everybody, or good afternoon to most of you. My name is Paul Doherty. I am here from the National Alliance of Public Safety GIS Foundation. And before we get started, I wanted to turn it over actually to Monty Bell, who is leading this mission mapping effort with the Mountain Rescue Association. So Monty, I believe you wanted to say a few words.
Yeah, thanks, Paul. Hey, everyone. Good to talk to you. Those of you that know me know that this is a project that we started a couple of years ago as the chairman of the Statistics Committee. We were looking a way to gather statistics for the MRA, something other than a paper process, and also give the membership something else that they can utilize, which is the GIS mapping. So Paul and I got together along with John Petter, you'll be hearing here shortly, came up with this idea, and then thanks to the wonderful work of John and Paul, we are able to accomplish what we've accomplished today. So much so that next week we're doing a presentation for the California Office of Emergency Services, and all of California's 58 counties will now be adopting this same portal the way we're doing it. And then I've also got a phone call next week to follow up with the state of Oregon, because they have reached out to me wanting to do the same thing that California is going to be doing, and that the MRA actually pioneered and started. So this thing is really starting to grow legs. So without further ado, I want to just kind of turn this back over to Paul Doherty. Paul is a senior project manager now with the National Alliance for Public Safety GIS Foundation, or what we call NAPSIG. Paul and I have known each other for quite some time, back when he was a ranger at Yosemite National Park. Then he went to work with Esri, and which is the company that we get the mapping GIS software from. And so with that said, Paul, go ahead.
All right. Well, I want to make sure that the purpose of why we're here is really clear. We would like to actually review the 2015 data, so you can see, for those of you that participate in this, the fruits of your labor. And Monty can speak to the power of what this data collection has done. And then I want to get right into 2016, showing you some of the improvements to the data collection system. And for those of you that are seeing it for the first time, this will be a quick introduction into how to use it. And finally, I want to show you the potential for collaboration with other people who are mapping across the MRA, with partners of the MRA, and maybe show you a little bit more of what's possible, because up to this point we've really used this mapping portal just for mission data collection, but as you've probably figured, could be used for doing much more. So what is the mapping portal? It is ArcGIS Online. ArcGIS Online is a software. It is an online collaborative tool that allows you to use, create, and share maps. It's used by a lot of different agencies and a lot of different businesses to do things similar to what the MRA is doing. All of that being said, it's a software that's been configured for the MRA to use. It's been configured by volunteers primarily, so John Petter and myself. If you want to learn more about ArcGIS Online, it's pretty easy to do a search, and there's a specific page called What is ArcGIS Online that you'll want to look for. And just as a reminder, all of the links that you'll see in this presentation will be made available with the slides, so don't feel like you need to write them all down. Now, who has access to this portal? It is the MRA members, and they are the ones that are entering data into this portal. That being said, if you are on this call and you need a login, please email us at mramapping@gmail.com. Or if you're already in contact with Monty, please coordinate with Monty to get a login. We understand from year to year that the person entering the data may change, but for now, just send us a note. So again, today we're just going to review the 2015 data. We're going to talk about 2016 data collection, what else we can be doing with maps, and then at the end we'll do a question and answer session. So 2015, what did we learn? Well, we wanted answers to questions. We wanted answers to very simple questions like what were the number of incidents, but also more complex questions like where did those incidents occur? And from the where part of this, by answering the question about where these incidents occurred, we can get a lot more information. In addition, we wanted details like, the number of people rescued, the number of missions per team. We want to get an idea of where teams are responding to. And so you'll see all of that in this dashboard, which, by the way, all of you have access to. So the 2015 missions dashboard, I'm going to show you some screenshots, but this dashboard is live, so you can see the data coming into the platform. There are still people entering in 2015 data. And the operations dashboard is a configurable application. In other words, if you'd like to see something else on this dashboard, it's something that can be relatively easily configured. But I'm not expecting all of you to be able to do this on your own at this point. But as you see here, this dashboard is using the data that's being entered in actually right now. And on the dashboard, you can see the number of total missions entered for 2015. I believe there's a few 2016 entries in here, and we'll carry those over. But you see there's been 1,402 incidents entered into the mission data collection system. I'll talk a little bit about the response area in a second, but you can see based off of the geography of where the MRA is active, it's a very, very large response area. And you can see here the heat map on the map of where teams are most active. This is just a visualization tool. Obviously, there's a lot of teams in Southern California and the Southwest and in Colorado, but as we zoom in, and sorry, Alaska, you're not on the zoom in there. On the zoom in, you can start to see pockets of activity on where the MRA is most active. And so this is a really unique way to look at the data versus just looking at it on a giant spreadsheet. And this is again, the dashboard application. So again, these are screenshots from about a week ago. But you can see here through the dashboard, we're answering questions. We're able to zoom in and actually see where these individual locations have occurred. We can see things like the total number of people rescued. So at that point in time, it was over 1,700 people. And we can estimate things like the average number of personnel per mission. In this case, just the average, the mean number of people per mission was 8 people. And one of the really cool things is to be able to answer the question of about how many volunteer hours does the MRA put into missions and training each year. And for those that have entered data, you've helped collect this statistic, 56,000 hours or more of volunteer hours. Through this dashboard, we can also do things like get summary of the types of missions. So you can see here, approximately half the missions are categorized as rescues versus search operations and training. And then we can also run reports. And so this little report tool is configured just to answer some of the questions that the MRA wanted answers to, like how many missions involve aircraft. And so when I click the run the report button, I can see that there were 25 missions involving aircraft just in this particular extent. It looks like just Colorado and some of northern New Mexico. But we can also look at things, again, from a statistics standpoint. We can look at the number of missions per team. So we can see here Rocky Mountain, right now anyway, has entered the most missions at 200. And here I just have a summary of the top 10 teams, but we can look at it by individual team. And one of the more interesting analyses that we conducted this year, and it's preliminary at this point, is we looked at if you connect all of the dots and just draw a polygon, in other words, run an analysis to draw this shape, which teams have the largest service areas. This also helped us clean up the data a little bit. For instance, if someone entered data outside of their state, it was most likely a mistake, and we can move that into the proper location, although some of you do interstate rescue. So you can see here Marin County had a very large service area responding across most of Northern California. But I wanted to explore with the data a little bit, so we did a quick analysis to say, well, if the MRA is interested in using this information to understand who's being rescued or who lives in these response areas, we can look at things like demographics. So inside of this mapping platform is demographic information that typically actually a business might use to understand who lives in the neighborhoods where they might put a new shop. So for instance, Starbucks might want to know who lives within a 2-mile radius of the next Starbucks location so they can prepare and understand the types of services they'll provide. Well, if we take the MRA service data and look at that, we can actually see here what people spend their money on in these areas. So if we look just at New Jersey Search and Rescue, for instance, they live in a relatively high density area with a large population, and we can look at things like what percentage of the population in that area actually participates in hiking versus something like, yoga or weightlifting. We can look at the amount of money they're spending on active sportswear. So for instance, if we wanted to target fundraising for our team or for the MRA as a whole, if you look at the footprint of where the MRA is active, we can actually run spatial analyses to understand where people are spending money on sporting wear. So I was joking with Monty, but maybe we should be more serious. Maybe we should be calling the Patagonias and Mountain Hardwares to say, hey, look at the areas where the MRA is active. Do you want to partner with us? But it's really up to you the types of questions we'll ask this platform now that you know a little bit more about it. What are the things you want to know about the areas where you're rescuing? You might want to know more things about the landscape in that area. What's the average slope in this area? Or what's the dominant land type? How many wildfires have there been? The types of questions we can ask are nearly limitless, but what I really want to know are what are the questions that are important to you about where you're doing response. So that was a quick summary of the 2015 data collection. And again, you can get access to that right through the dashboard, and I'll show you where all of this is stored in just a few moments. So let's move on to the 2016 mission data collection. This will be more of a tutorial and orientation for how things should work in 2016. John Petter and myself have worked to get the 2016 mission data collection off to a good start. I would suggest that at this point, we're very open to feedback. Monty has really tried to take all of your feedback over the past year and incorporate it into the 2016 mission data collection plan. So you might see a few changes, but in general, the interface will look like this. So if you were to go to the MRA Mapping Platform homepage, which is where I believe most of you are accessing the portal at this point, you can access the 2016 data portal from this thumbnail here, and you'll see it's stamped with the year 2016. Again, this is the homepage. You access this by going to this link. You can actually always go to arcgis.com and sign in with your MRA credentials. It'll take you to this same location. And this is the mapping portal. This is more important to get to this site for the teams that are looking to do a little bit more mapping rather than just entering mission data. For those of you that just want to enter mission data and that's all you want to do, you now only need just this one link. This link, MRA 2016 data. If you bookmark it, this is the link that we're going to keep live for the year so that whenever you go here, this is where you're going to be entering your information. So this new interface was actually inspired by our partners with the University of Southern California, who are helping California OES begin to collect the same data, and they use this interface called the Map Series. This is actually one of the ArcGIS online templates called the Map Series, but we're using it here so that your apps for collecting and editing data and viewing data are all right here. So this brings us to the next part of our presentation here. So pretend for a second that your team is responding to an incident or has just responded to an incident, and you've got a short narrative of information. The key information I need to know are things like, what type of incident was this? And I can tell by reading it that Steve Clark was scheduled to meet with his companions, but today they reported him missing, so now I know I'm dealing with a missing person search operation. And I get some basic geographic information in here, which will probably make more sense to those of you that have visited and spent time in Yosemite National Park. We might have some information in here like the person's age and their height. These are all things that we want to quickly enter into the mapping platform so that they don't get lost. I might have information in here a little more specific about the initial planning point or the last known point or the point last seen. And I want to be able to enter that information into the mapping platform as well. Before we get started entering data, let's remember for a second that in 2015, a lot of people had said that the form was too long and that it didn't apply to them in most cases for something like a simple carryout or training mission. And so what we've done this year is we've created something called the short form, which is for simple incidents and training, and the long form, which has more questions, in particular for things like search operations or mass casualty incidents. So for most of you, you're going to be using the short form for the majority of your incidents. So I'll show you what this looks like. So if you go to the MRA homepage and you click on this mission data portal, or like I said before, you can just keep that one short bit.ly link bookmarked. You'll see here that we have a tabbed interface. Now, I'm the author of this map, so I have a few more tools so that I can edit this. But you'll see here the first tab that comes up is the short form. The short form instructs you to simply enter incident information, enter the location of the mission, and to simply hit complete form. Again, the email here for help is mramapping@gmail.com. And you'll see here now the form is limited to just the basics, but these are required fields. So the mission number or name, that's the number that your team uses. I'll just call this Clark 123. My team, I'll pick on Sierra Madre today. Notice that when I begin typing, it brings up a contextual, a drop down. So for those of you in the bottom of the alphabet, that can save you some time. Our mission type, in this case, it is a search mission. Our mission date, we set it this year so that it defaults to today's date, but don't forget to change this to the date of the actual mission. I will say that this occurred yesterday. And this mission occurred in county. In other words, it was in my primary response area. And there's 4 of us, and we're on the call for an hour, so I'll say this is a total of 4 volunteer hours. I'll get into this a little bit later, but this is an estimate of the total number of volunteer hours for that mission. Number of subjects, subject category. In this case, this person was noted as hiking, male. I didn't memorize the age here, so we'll go back. So I'm looking at my presentation slides, but this could be your report. Age was 62. And let's say at this point we don't know much about the subject fitness or subject experience. We can simply put unknown, and we can change that later. At this point in time, there were no aircraft used, and the comments will allow 2,000 characters. This is not meant to be your exhaustive narrative that you would include in your own internal reports. This is more for your own reference. It should be short and sweet and describe the incident, and it could be copied and pasted from your report. But again, it's a short summary, as this is a database, not an actual report. If you feel really compelled to enter or attach the entire report, you can select your file here, and I believe it should be a Word document or a PDF. This will also take photos. And now we have to select a location. And this is something we get a lot of questions on. So I want to run through the couple of different ways you can enter information here. I could, if I was at the incident location, I could click Locate Me. Or I can find an address or place. As we know, most of your incidents don't really occur at addresses or places. And so I put the option in there to also use the US National Grid geocoder from FEMA. We can enter latitude and longitude, and this can only be done with this particular interface with decimal degrees. As some of you are attending the training next week on US National Grid, there's also an option to enter in US National Grid coordinates here. And I know a lot of teams use UTM. And so again, we're using the interface that is included in this application, but it does allow you to do things like copying the easting and northing. And don't forget to select your zone number. And this will take you to the map, and it'll actually put a pin on your map. I can zoom in by clicking here. And another trick for those of you that haven't figured this out, if you hold down Shift, you can draw a box to zoom in to this particular area you're interested in. The smaller the box, the more you'll zoom. And while I've entered in coordinates, if I notice that this point is slightly off, I can actually drag this location over to the correct location. So as I know, sometimes it's not exactly at the place name or coordinates that you've typed in. Once you're happy with the location, we move to step 3 and we submit the entry. Now, it's been added to the map, but if you want to check, you can also use this View Submissions tab here, which will take you to a very simple list of missions and a simple map. Or we can use another more powerful app, which I'll show you in just a few minutes. Now, I mentioned that's the short form. The long form has more questions specific to things like search operations and incidents where there's more than one rescue subject. And so the long form will have more questions, and yes, will take a little bit more time to fill out. But the idea was that this form can be used to help get more information about especially missing person searches. So you'll see here you have an option for your mission with the additional questions related to missing person search, and a found. And this is a separate point, and you wouldn't enter this in obviously until you've found the subject. But this information can be used to help collect information similar to the lost person behavior textbook. And Robert Kester, the author of that book, has actually requested this data. So if you want to participate, this form is a great way to do it. And just to make sure everybody's still with us, are any of the other panelists still on the line? Are you still seeing my screen?
Yes.
Yep. You're all
good.
good.
All right. And you're still awake, so that's a bonus.
Amazing.
That's
Great.
Thank you.
So that's a really simple way to make the data available. Again, there's a short form, fill it out to the best of your ability, and there's a long form that's really meant for more complex operations. I should say all of the data on the long form are required, which means you'll have to fill them out in order to hit submit. If you don't know the answer, there's an other or unknown category for that form. Some other quick notes from things that have come up last year is Please avoid putting special characters in anywhere where you're typing. This makes it harder to export the data as a database later on. You can add attachments if needed, or if you find benefit in doing that. And you can always go back and enter more information or edit data. So please not panic if you think you made a mistake or something changed. So to edit data, we wanted to use an interface that would work well for you to be able to search for your data, see it all on a map, click on it, and make the changes you need. So this is not a form-based process. This is something called a web mapping application. So for instance, if I wanted to go back and change the number of rescuers and the number of volunteer hours, I can go ahead and do that. To do this, I'm going to click the Edit Missions Web Mapping App tab. So if we go back to our mission data portal, you'll see there's a tab here for editing missions. And this is an app that has a few more tools. This is an app that will allow you to, for instance, print a quick map of your screen if for some reason you need to do that. And this is also the one that's going to allow me to edit my data. So if we are to pan west back here to Yosemite, or type in the box here, Yosemite National Park. I can actually go in, and as long as this editing tool is open, click on the point, and I can actually go in and edit the information that's here. Again, the editing toolbar has to be open. You'll see here I put a little information box that explains the different tools in the app. You can close that or get access to it at any time by clicking the little README box. The tools that are in this map, just to give you a brief overview, is the editing tool, which allows me to actually edit the points. There's an attribute table, or just a table, and this is really probably what a lot of you were used to looking at before the mapping platform. You can see a spreadsheet of your data. You can set this so that it filters by your map extent, so it just looks at the area that you're zoomed into. And this just simply gives you a list of the missions in that area. If I want to see all the missions, I can unclick the filter there. And now I can see that there's 7 missions entered. Other options are the ability to export all of these incidents to CSV. So this is a new tool that we're working with to see if it works well for exporting all those incidents. It says export all to CSV, and a CSV is simply a spreadsheet of your data. I also mentioned you can quickly print a map. And by print, I mean it'll make a PDF, which can be used later on. So this is going to go out and print a PDF using the mapping platform. And I can either save that PDF or print it out on my printer if I have one hooked up. There's a feature that a few people had asked for and might be useful if you're using this for more than just mission data collection. Finally, this is more of a mapping tool, so we just put some of the basic tools that are in here, like being able to turn layers on and off. For instance, I added the US National Grid as a reference layer that can be turned on and off at whatever scale you'd like. The ability to change a base map, and this is really important. You might be looking for the latest imagery of the area, and this is something that you'll have in ArcGIS Online. And for those of you in the maritime areas, there's an oceans-based map that might be helpful. And even though a lot of these are out of date, we're making the USGS topographic maps available as a base map. Remember, those will only work down to the 1 to 24,000 zoom scale, but that might help you with some of your mapping. And then for now, I also left the 2015 dashboard in here so that you can see this and look at the old data. As more data comes into 2016's dashboard, I'll embed that into the tab here. So you can see here now the total number of missions is up to 1,402. Again, that portal that has the short form, the long form, the web mapping app, and the dashboard are all on this one link, the MRA 2016 data link. So please bookmark that. I put a note in here, and some of you might have noticed it, that this is a web app that really can be customized. If your team would like a web app that perhaps has more of your own data, local trails, or maybe you want live weather or something like that, that's something that we can work on to support as the MRA mapping team, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later. But for now, in this edit data app, we try to just put the tools that you'd be using 90% of the time. So we're a little more than halfway through the presentation here, but I wanted to just get through and show you what this could look like if we were to use the mapping platform to do more with maps. So let's say at this point I actually need to do a little bit more mapping. I've entered in a little bit of data for the MRA mission data collection, but I actually want to use maps for either a training mission to teach people about search operations, or maybe someday in the future we can actually use this for incident response. So you'll see on the MRA mapping platform homepage, I put an experimental tool called MapSAR Online. And for those of you that already know Don or John Petter, MapSAR is a project where we were making ArcGIS Desktop, the GIS tool, available in a way that would really help people assist in search operations. What we've done here is taken that same concept and applied it using the MRA mapping platform. So what if we were to take some of the tools that were in MapSAR using ArcGIS Desktop and make it available as an actual online mapping tool? The idea being here, what if I could begin mapping my incident before I leave the office to head out into the field so that other people have situational awareness as to what's going on? So for instance, for our scenario today, what if I was able to put the last known position, the first hasty assignment, some trail blocks, and the incident command post on the map? What if I was able to plot some of the clues on the map before I even leave my office? I think that this could be a useful tool, and so we're experimenting with this right now, and it's a project called MapSAR Online. Now, if we were able to use this tool, I could work with other GIS people like Don Ferguson to really begin running analysis and maybe even doing analysis remotely. Don would have an accurate map of where this incident's occurring, and he would have all the information he needs to begin doing analyses. So we actually tested this out just this last week, and I wanted to show you what that looks like. So by using the mapping platform, Don had access to some of the basic information. Where did I want a hasty assignment? Where did I want to do some trail blocks? All of the missing person search information he needed. And we used MapSAR Online to collaborate. And what we found was this could be a really useful tool for incident support. Don could be creating assignment maps using his tool based off the information I gave him while I'm heading out into the field. So he could be printing PDFs, putting them on a thumb drive, or parking them somewhere online and getting those shipped to the command post even if there's no internet connection there. We could be using this to collaborate on, processing all the GPS data to estimate our search coverage. But I would prefer, when we talk about collaborating with GIS, that we do it even before incidents occur. If Don and I were to collaborate before the season starts, maybe he could help me get some maps with the latest and local trail data, so that I have not just a base map, but actual maps of where trails are in my area. Things like hazards, mines, and other things can be added to the map to help me with pre-planning. But I want to take a look at some of the spatial analyses that Don could do with just that simple information I loaded up in the platform. So here, Don created this map menu. It's called the SAR GIS Gallery. And if you go to this gallery, you can pick from different map products that you would like to use. And so I can literally use this like a Chinese food menu and say, Don, I need a situation map, which is a large format map with an accurate, current, and detailed record of the incident. And when I ask for the situation map, Don knows what I'm talking about and can produce that map because we have this menu. And so this is something we've been working on together for a little while. And so I used the Chinese food menu to make a few orders with Don for this incident. And here's what he produced. So he was able to very quickly produce the initial planning point distance. So using the lost person behavior book, he could create some buffers. That's a very simple tool that can actually be added right to MapSAR Online. But he was able to produce it as a cartographic product, and in this case, he geo-referenced the traditional park map rather than the USGS topo base map. But he can also do some more complex analyses, like look at things like, based on where the person was last seen, how far could they get in about 12 hours? And where would they be at about 2 hours? So here on the right, you see a legend for time, and really what you're looking at is time on the map. So it would take approximately 4 or 5 hours to get to Merced Lake, and it would take closer to 9 to 10 hours to get to Vogelsang, which is this missing person's ultimate destination. What if this subject had a cell phone? So if he had a cell phone, would he be in cell coverage in that area? And through collaboration with people like Don and John and others, perhaps the AFRCC, we can produce maps of where is there actually cell coverage in that area. Or if the person accessed a cell phone and hit towers, what can we do with that data? So these are the types of analyses we could be collaborating with if we use this mapping platform to collaborate. Finally, one of the last analyses I asked for was, Don, can you print me a map of the different watersheds in Yosemite? And based off of some research we had done earlier, we learned that watersheds, or these catchment basins that are surrounded by ridgelines, are really helpful in understanding our planning area. Most people in this study in Yosemite were found within the same exact watershed they were last seen, or an immediately adjacent one. So the good news is the subject was actually found alive in this case. And so completing our mission is really simple. I can go to the long form, and through long form I told you there's both a mission location and also a found location. And so this could be a few days later when the person's found. It could be a month later, but I can enter this information into the long form very, very quickly. The long form for a person found is actually very short. It's very important that the mission number matches the mission number on the last mission entry. Found location, this can be a written description, and really isn't necessary since you're going to enter it on the map. Found date, we can say it was today. This time I was given coordinates in US National Grid. Oops. Copy and paste isn't working super well right now. Okay. And I can set my location for point found, again, using a different coordinate system than what I used before. And submit my entry. And again, all of that will show up on the Edit Missions app, so I can go back and change data if needed. Again, that shift and click will zoom into the area, draw a little box in. And because this is all live, I can see it on my map here. And if I made a total mistake, I can even go in and delete the information, which I'll do after this presentation. Okay, so again, that was a quick review of the long form, how it can be used to plot found locations. So during the year, we experimented a little bit. Specific teams had asked me to help them deploy custom web mapping applications for data entry. That's something that I'd like to see expanded this year to help you all actually customize these maps yourself. There are also requests to make public information maps to show where teams were active. So I'm helping a team or two do that now. And I also could see this being used to plan a training exercise. We've used this platform in the past with various SAR training events. And so those are three areas where I could see us really expanding the use of the mapping portal. If you want to get started using the map part of this to actually create your own maps, on the mapping platform page, you just click on this button that says Map. And when you do that, especially if it's your first time using this, you can actually take a really quick tour of how to make a very simple map. Now this will be a generic tour. It's not created just for the MRA. I forget the scenario they use now, but it's very simple to use and gives you an idea of what this web map, which is really where all the mapping starts, it gives you an idea of how the web map works. So I suggest if you haven't done that, to take that tour today to get a better idea of how the mapping part of this portal actually works. I also mentioned that you can use this mapping platform to make public maps, but you can also use it to do private sharing. So if you're working with another team on an incident or a training exercise, there's the ability to create groups to share individually with the people that you want to share it with. And you can actually create groups that are inter-agency. So for instance, if California OES uses their ArcGIS Align account, we can connect with their user through something called a group. And so that's something we can talk more about later. One of the coolest things that I think most of you will enjoy when you begin to explore the web map is just looking at the breadth of other data that's already in the mapping portal. As I mentioned, GIS people from around the world are using this same system. And so for instance, in Washington State, if you zoom into that area and type in Washington Trails, you'll see that the state of Washington has made all federal, state, local, and I think even some of the non-governmental organization trail data available. It's already out there. You don't have to create the maps from scratch. A lot of the data is in there. And so I think that's probably a great place to start, exploring how else you could be using the mapping portal. Embedding maps into websites. So for instance, on the homepage, there's an MRA Teams map. I think it would be a really simple project to go ahead and grab what's called the HTML code. You can actually just send this to your webmaster or whoever's managing your team's website, and you can actually embed public maps so that you can show, for instance, where your team was active in 2015, or where to find where to go for the next orientation meeting or training. So I wanted to, and I hope I was successful in doing this, showing you the 2015 data. I wanted to show you how to get access to the platform in 2016. I wanted to expand on some of the ideas of what else we could be doing with the mapping platform. But because so many of you have questions and we have a little less than 15 minutes left, I wanted to first address with Monty and John, what are some of the questions that have come up that are really common? And so I listed those here, and I'm going to answer them with Monty in a second. But here are the list of questions, and I'll go through them individually. But do I have to answer all of the questions on the form? What if I already collect data? Can I export the data? When should I fill out the form? How do I estimate mission hours? And where do I get help? And those are really the 6 most common questions we had in 2015. And I'll start with number 1. Do I have to answer all of the questions? And the answer is yes. All of the questions on the short form are now required. As I mentioned before, if you don't know something, you can always put unknown or other and go back to it later. For the long form, we recognize there's a lot of information there, and it may not apply equally to every single incident. But do the best you can to fill out all of the questions in full so that we get the best quality data we can, especially for things like missing person search operations. And I don't know, if Monty, if you have anything to add to that. So I guess the short answer is yes.
Yes.
How about, what if I already collect data? And so there are a few teams that have their own data collection system that they've had for a number of years, and they're really happy using it, and they don't want to have to enter data in twice, especially if it's identical information. So what we've done is really work the best we can to develop an import plan. In other words, to take the data out of your data collection system and import it into the MRA system. And I would say we've been successful in doing that, but it is time intensive. And also consider that this is, a volunteer-run system, and most of the teams don't have a software developer on their team that can build the data collection system. And so the best thing you can do is to try to meet with us early on in the season to figure out a data import plan, so that at the end of the year when we're importing data, or if we do it periodically, there's no issues there. And if you email us, I believe Monty and John, we have a schema, or in other words, what the database should look like to make sure that it imports successfully. And I just wanted to touch on, we're using the ArcGIS Pro or ArcGIS Desktop to do a lot of this data manipulation. That's something that we can show you how to use in the future, but for importing data, it's something that we use this tool for, and I wanted to let you know that, it can take some time, especially if the data is not clean or in the right formats. Can I export the data? And the short answer to that is yes. The long answer is why. If you want to be able to just see it in Excel, that's to make your own graphs and things like that, that's actually a very simple thing to do. We can export the data as a CSV, as I mentioned before. But it's also downloadable and can be put into other formats too. So for instance, KML, if you're using it in something like Google Earth or ArcGIS Earth, it can be exported as shapefiles in geodatabases for people who are doing GIS work. And you can actually connect to it through some open data services. But let us know why you want to export the data, because there may be something that is more easily done inside of the mapping platform For instance, I showed you today how you can look at a simple list of incidents. That's not something you'd want to have to download the data for every single time. When should I fill out the form? And I think we're learning this lesson right now, as I notice while I'm presenting, people are still entering in 2015 data, hundreds of incidents all in one sitting. So when should you fill out the form? You should fill it out as soon as possible after an incident's over. You can always go back and edit the details, but it's better to get the information out soon after the incident is over, because that's when the information's the most recent, the most fresh in your mind. And doing something that takes 5 minutes once right after an incident occurs is better than doing something that takes 5 minutes multiplied by 100 at the end of the year. How do I estimate mission hours? This has been really confusing for a lot of people, and if you made mistakes in 2015, it's okay. But recognize that the goal for estimating mission hours is that we have an understanding of what's the total effort for each individual team. How many, being able to answer the question of the number of volunteer hours that the MRA donates is really, really powerful, especially if you can show it on the map. So for an incident like today, I mentioned there were 4 responders and it was 1 hour long, then we know that the number of mission hours is 4. But we also recognize that during complex multi-operational period incidents, you may not be able to track that information with as much precision. Someone might do 8 hours, Monty might volunteer 20 hours, John might volunteer 4. We hope that your team is already collecting this detailed data, but we recognize that you might have to estimate that. So just do your best. And then finally, where do I get help? Well, we've created an email alias that will get to Monty, John, and myself, and hopefully more volunteers. But you can email mramapping@gmail.com. And I wanted to announce that this year, the MRA and the NAPSG Foundation, the foundation that I work with, we're going to be co-hosting something called the MRA Mapping Hangout. And what this means is once a month we'll get together for an hour with maybe a short informal presentation, and then the rest of the time can be used for asking questions or doing demonstrations on something like making a custom map or making a public map, or maybe something like using US National Grid for search operations and other things. So for those of you that have lots of questions, we'd like to be able to make it so that when we answer them, everybody benefits, and that's really the purpose of these mapping hangouts. So expect more details on the where and whens of that, but for now we're proposing the second Tuesday of each month at about 11 a.m. Mountain Time. If you need help right now or you want to be able to explore this information on your own, ArcGIS Online has its own help documentation. There's also a very short free online course called Getting Started with GIS. That would be more for people who are looking to understand more about GIS and mapping. And then NAPSG has a list of resources on their homepage specifically for public safety and GIS professionals. So I guess one of my real closing points is recognize that by having access to this mapping platform, you've now entered a community of public safety GIS professionals and responders who work with public safety GIS professionals. And so through the National Alliance for Public Safety GIS Foundation, you have access to our regional leadership teams, which means there's probably someone in your area already in each of the FEMA regions that's been using GIS either as a responder or as a specialist for a long time to do other things like fight fires and respond to flooding and other things. So they probably can help you with some of the things you're trying to do with your team already. Before we get to questions and answers, I just wanted to thank all of the MRA members who provided feedback. This is a volunteer-run operation. We're doing the best we can to work with the technology and your feedback to improve the system. I wanted to thank Mark Johnson specifically from who's working on a master's degree and use this project to actually help us in California OAS improve this data collection system. I wanted to thank John and Monty and I guess myself for volunteering to run the system, and of course the Esri nonprofit organization program who made this mapping platform available to us through that program. So with that, I guess I could turn it back to any of the other panelists or Jessica for question and answer.
Okay, we do have a few questions, so I'll read them aloud and then whoever feels most qualified can answer them. And I will change it back to my screen here. Let's see. While I'm doing that, the first question is, can teams fill in data from previous years, and if so, how far back?
That's a great question. I think it's come up once or twice before. So I guess it depends on what you're trying to do it for. We could create an archive form, I guess. That's one option that pops into my head, where it would be generic. You could enter it in from any year as long as it's not any of our collection years. That's one idea. But so from a technology perspective, yes, absolutely. If you already have data in a spreadsheet format and you already have coordinates, then that's even easier to put on a map. But if you're talking about using this process, yes, it's possible, but we'd have to set that up. I don't know if Monty or John, you have any ideas on that?
Yeah, I really think that would be a question more for Monty, because we've had data collections previously which were done through spreadsheets, Excel, etc. It wasn't until last year that we really started to collect the spatial element of these, so it's more of an administrative question than a technical question.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that, if a team has a desire to do that, I'm sure that we can go on an individual basis to do that. I wouldn't want to clutter up. I don't know what that would look like, but yeah, I mean, I think if we can make it happen, and it's not too cumbersome on the volunteers, maybe we can.
Yeah, it'd be a good conversation for the mapping hangout next month.
Okay, the next question is, when printing a map in PDF format, is that PDF georeferenced, i.e. a GeoPDF?
Great question. So as of right now, no. The print server that we're using doesn't have that as a feature. When John or Don or I use it from the ArcGIS desktop, it is. But from this web application right now, it is not a GeoPDF. And I don't know, John, if that's something you've seen people customize on other platforms or not.
Yeah, it is something that we've done on other platforms. For those of you who are using Esri's nonprofit software and have access to that, that's something that you can easily pull down onto the desktop and say we can do that as one of our Hangout topics, and we can show you how to create those GeoPDFs very easily in the desktop product.
Okay, this question is for Monty. It's a two-part question. The first one is the MRA requiring teams to input this data at present?
That comes up a couple of times a year, and the answer to that question is yes. And but is it enforced? Not entirely. But when all MRA teams initially apply to the MRA, part of the application is we ask the question, will you submit statistics to the MRA on an annual ongoing basis? And every team since I've been the membership chairman for the last 15 years has answered that question as yes, but not everybody does it, and we don't really enforce it. But there has been talk with the MRA board of directors and the officers specifically to come up with a solution to get more adoption of people submitting those statistics.
Okay, and the second part to the question is, what percentage of teams are reporting this data?
That's a good question. We've been so busy putting together this, the new look for the 2016, that I haven't looked at that, or Paul has either that I'm aware of. I know Paul just recently sent me some data on that, and maybe, Paul, you can kind of find that out. I do know that it will be part of the presentation that I present to the MRA at our business meeting, which will be in Salt Lake City. I do have a section there on the agenda where I update everybody on almost exactly what we just talked about here, but a shorter version, along with how many people are participating and then also who's not participating.
Yeah, I can say that there's a few teams that probably just either they're, and Monty, you know the term for this, I guess they're associate teams or they're partners. So obviously we're not requiring the national parks enter the data, but most of the teams that have a login and have like responded to it have actually entered data. I'm not going to embarrass any teams, or everybody has their own reasons for not doing this, but yeah, there's a number of teams that haven't signed in 2015, so I'm anticipating either they lost their login and they need help, or they're entering data right now.
Yeah, and we're going to reach out to those teams. I can tell you that from the beginning of this project, and when we started this a couple of years ago until where we're at today, the adoption has been tenfold. And I can tell you that from the beginning of our statistics collection for the MRA, which I was a part of going back, more than 15 years ago, we've looked at different solutions to get adoption. And we went from everything from having a long, complex cumulative or aggregate form that was filled out at the end of the year to where we are today. And I can tell you that if you look at what 15 years ago, the amount of teams submitting information and what that looked like and the percentage to where we are today with this new platform where people actually get to see visually instead of a one-dimensional sheet of paper or an Excel spreadsheet. They actually get to see the fruits of their labor, per se, on the thing. That adoption and that increase of people putting stuff in statistics has increased at least 100-fold. It's absolutely amazing on how many people now are participating on teams that for the last 20 years didn't turn anything in, and now they are, and we can actually see that result.
Yeah, if you go to the 2015 dashboard, there's an ability to check map contents on and off, and so you can do a quick visual analysis between 2015 and 2014, and on the heat map in particular, you can already see an increase, especially in like the Intermountain region, Idaho, and along the Rockies as well. Either there are way more incidents or there are a lot more people entering in data, and I'm going to pull up the 2013 data as soon as we can as well, from a numeric standpoint, just to see the total number of missions. So, good question.
All right, the next question is, can a non-MRA member team input data?
So I guess I can take that one, and that would be no. This is only for MRA teams. It's a member benefit for our MRA teams.
Yeah, I would say from a technology perspective, other teams are adopting this, like California OAS and others, and there are other search and rescue associations across the world that are adopting either this platform or something similar. But so from a policy perspective, as Monty said, no, this is for MRA members. But if you have other teams that are interested, it's a great conversation to have.
Okay, the next question is, our SAR unit is not assigned to any specific county, so do we consider our most active county, which considers us as their primary SAR, as our home county, or the one where our compound is located?
That's a good question. Monty, we're collecting the spatial information, so we can always do an analysis to see if it's in the county they're located, but what do you want them to answer on the form?
So I'm assuming we're talking about whether they're in county or out of county and how they're going to do that. That's an interesting question, because that actually came up over the weekend because one of our teams, Alpine Mountain Rescue, outside of Denver, I didn't realize this, but they actually service 3 different counties that they're all adjacent to, and they are the rescue team for all 3 different counties. So they actually have 3 counties that they supply, not just one that they're associated to. So I would say just for simplicity's sake, I would probably list the particular county that you have the highest call-outs to, and let that be the base county that you utilize.
Okay. The next question is, how much does access or a license to ArcGIS cost for an MRA team?
Sorry about that. So the MRA buys 100 licenses for distribution to our teams. We buy it in a block of 100. We actually, I think we're utilizing almost 90 of those licenses. We have a few in reserve for administrative people and such. So the MRA currently pays, we've negotiated a deal, $100 per team is all that we pay for the use of this license, which not only gives us that team the platform to fill in the statistics, but it also gives you, as you've seen by Paul's presentation, the entire full gamut of anything that you could possibly imagine from GIS, ArcGIS Online. You have access to that as well.
Yeah, and keep in mind if you're looking to expand use, but specifically for search and rescue, you also can apply through the nonprofit organization program. So for instance, if you are looking to do more with mapping and you want to get an ArcGIS desktop license for maybe your team or an associate that's not part of the MRA, there's also a nonprofit association program or nonprofit organization program that would apply to you. Other things to look at are the ArcGIS for Home Use program, which is actually the same pricing model, and that gets you access to ArcGIS Online and ArcGIS Desktop as well.
Okay, and kind of a secondary question to that, is there a need to purchase anything to utilize MapStar Online or StarGIS functions that you've shown during the presentation?
No, so that's actually what we want to expand on this year, is looking at how teams might use this for other functions. So there's no additional cost. You already have access to it. The MapStar Online, you know, what I'm calling a sandbox, is already accessible from the home page. So you can begin using that today to experiment with. We will go out and clear the data from time to time just so the map's not cluttered. But think of that as like a sandbox or a training platform. If it's something you're looking to operationalize, you know, that's a perfect conversation for the mapping hangout, as I'd like to really see how MRA teams would explore and use that. So no, there's no additional cost for MapStar Online.
Okay. The next question is, will there be a provision for bulk import of data?
So yes, there is, but that provision is not through that web interface at this point to add that data. So when we have our hangout, we can talk about that a little more depth. But I'm doing that currently for a couple of teams. I know Paul's worked on that with a team as well, so we can assist with the bulk import of that data. You're just going to need to match the schema and other things. So I think it's a topic we can dig deeper into in the hangout.
And just to follow up on that real quick, you know, the whole goal of this from the initial planning of putting this together was for teams to do it immediately, as Paul indicated, you know, either during or after the search. And as you can see, even from the short form, that information is extremely limited, and it probably takes roughly, I think, with 2 to 3 minutes. And I think the long form, when I clocked it with the information in front of me on from an incident action plan, it took less than 5 minutes. So again, that's the intent of this. Bulk importing, you know, it does have its complexities, and it is time consuming, and we are relying on all of our, you know, volunteer team here to do that. And so it, you know, it's probably not the best way of doing it.
Just something else I wanted to note is that you can do this from the field. The geoform that Paul showed you is totally accessible on any device that has a web browser. So if you're in CP and you have access to the internet while you're waiting for people during the search, you can start to actually enter that incident information in real time as you're hanging out.
Yeah, again, a lot of this can be discussed in the mapping hangouts, but there's even a collector app on your phone that works, disconnected. So you could, in theory, I don't know why you would want to do this, but you could be actually out on scene in the woods, filling out the form, if that's where you desire to do it. So.
Okay, and we have a couple of questions about recording mileage or calculating miles and drive times or drive routes, and whether or not any of that is possible or planned.
From a data collection standpoint, no, but I think probably what they're getting at is, can we do analyses like the drive time distance from your SAR cache or command post? If that's the question, yes, there are analysis tools for doing that. If the question is about collecting more types of data, that's a question for Monty.
Yeah, I mean, right now we've made our updates for the 2016 year. We'll be collecting that information. One of the things that when I go to the MRA business meeting in January, well, here in February, I have to sit between the two different groups of people. You have the one group of people on one side that says we are collecting, even with the short form, I will hear that is way too much information to collect. That's going to take forever, even though there's only 4 fillable boxes to fill in. And then I have the other group of people that says, you guys aren't collecting nearly enough. This thing should have at least another 25 more questions to gather any meaningful data. So I've been able to successfully kind of 50% piss off the ones that want more information and 50% piss off the ones that don't want, that we have too much information. So I think we're kind of right in the middle right now. So I think we're doing a pretty good job of staying that stead course. But we do actually, and I do read all the emails where people say, we'd like to see this or that, and I collect those, and then at the end of the year, like we're doing right now, we're kind of going through those and having conversations, and then, the platform is evolving because of it. So send us an email, and we'll definitely discuss it for sure.
Okay. The next one is it possible to filter data to a spreadsheet based on team name as opposed to the map?
Yes, I didn't show it today, but there's a filter function on that table, and that should work. If not, again, something we can cover in the mapping hangout. But yes, you can filter by any of the searchable attributes.
Okay. Next one is on an OES mission. If 10 teams respond, is it 1 search or 10?
Oh, for instance, Sierra Madre shows up, San Diego shows up, and Malibu show up.
Right. That's a question for Monty. Monty, you still on?
Yeah, no, I'm here. So,
okay.
So really how that works, and that's sort of some of the information that we're collecting, the in-county and out-of-county, along with the mission number. So like, for example, in California, if it's a mutual aid call, we all operate under the same Cal OES mutual aid number that's assigned to us. So when we put that in, we can easily now filter that data out because we know that 6 teams responded. This is the number, and we know that one county will be, or one team will have in-county checked as yes, and the rest of us will have out of county, and so we're able to filter that noise out to show the current information on really this one mission with 5 separate teams, not 5 separate missions going on.
Yeah, and that's actually a spatial analysis I want to look at next, where like how many teams have a response in the same exact location, because that's great. That shows collaboration between the MRA teams. So really interesting.
Yeah, and I mean, and the benefit obviously by collecting it from all different teams is that on a mutual aid, all the teams did respond. There was volunteer hours applied to it, even though it was all separate. So even though there was one mission, we still collected all the different volunteer hours, which is important for us to gather for various other uses.
All right, and the next one is, as this data collection grows, it will become very valuable to researchers, authors, maybe even like attorneys preparing for a case. Are there any provisions to sell this data, and if so, how will the money be distributed?
So that's a good, let me answer. So that's a good question. So a couple of things. One is that we don't have any intention at the moment to sell this data. What we have been doing, and Paul talked about that earlier on, and that is we have been providing that data for the last 10 years to a gentleman named Robert Custer. And Robert, people don't know, he actually puts SAR trainings together and teaches throughout the United States, and he has quite a few books he's written. But one of his projects is the initial search, I can't think of the name of it, but it's a database that the Department of Homeland Security actually gives him a grant for him to collect search and rescue statistics. And then he puts this together and gives it back to the Homeland Security, and it's actually published, and you can find it online. And it has, you know, thousands of this kind of information, much more in depth than we're collecting. So, and he sells that, but we don't actually sell it, nor do we have any intent. Now, that said, if this thing starts to grow, you know, we'll revisit that, you know, I'm sure with the board of directors of the MRA down the line.
Okay, and that looks like all of the questions. So I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up. So if you do have further questions, as Paul said throughout the presentation, you can email mramapping@gmail.com. The MRA webinar series hosts webinars frequently, so keep an eye on the MRA and PMI websites for future dates and topics. Those URLs there are also where you'll be able to find the video of this webinar, the recording of it, as well as the presentation slides during the webinar. And for news and updates, you can follow the MRA and PMI on Facebook and Twitter at the URL shown on your screen. And we did have one other question about when the recording will be up on the MRA site. The MRA and PMI sites will both be updated probably within the next week or so. You will receive an email also with these links in it. So you can just go back and check those links every once in a while, but it's usually within a week. So we thank everyone for attending. We hope that it was helpful, and thank you to all the presenters for presenting this. It was really awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a great day, everybody.
Thank you.